Welcome to Escape the Noise, a podcast about hiking, mental health, and everything in between. I'm Joe Vogel, your host. We're coming to you from the Silicon Slopes studio in downtown Provo, Utah. Our guest this week, Devin Ashby. Several years ago, Devin started a YouTube channel called Backcountry Exposure, where he reviewed backpacking and camping gear. Fast forward to 2024, and he has amassed over 60,000 subscribers. Devin also teaches a backpacking course at Utah Valley University. Join us as he talks about how he was able to build a career out of a passion and why introducing the next generation to hiking and camping is so important to him. All right, we are here with Devin Ashby today. Welcome, Devin. It's good to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Joe. This is awesome.
So we have followed you for quite a while now, and your YouTube channel and on Instagram and everything. It's called Backcountry Exposure, right?
Correct. Yep.
So tell us about that, how it got started, how you got into that.
I think as it is with a lot of things that you do in life, sometimes it happens on an accident. And this was an accident in the sense that I had initially started a blog.
Yeah.
That was kind of centered around hiking gear, backpacking gear, just outdoor gear as a outlet for me to like really dive into the technicalities of gear and like kind of reviewing it and testing it.
Yeah.
So that my wife didn't have to sit and listen to me.
She's probably very grateful, right?
Yeah. But it was just like, I was looking for kind of a creative outlet. And initially, so maybe I'm dating myself here a little bit, I started a blog.
I remember those.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah.
But the idea was I'm going to start making some videos that I can embed into the blog posts that I make. And then they would be like a companion to whatever gear I was reviewing at the time. And then I was like, why am I also writing? If I'm making videos, I should just be making videos.
Yeah.
And at the time, like backpacking and outdoor YouTube space was not very popular. Like it's not what it is now.
When was this?
This was 2012.
Okay.
13, 14, kind of like those 2-3 years of time that it was like, I'll do a few videos and then I stopped and it then just kind of took off at one point. But yeah.
So you make the switch from blogging essentially to the video content, right? Mm-hmm. And was the idea in the beginning mainly focused around gear, like that you were like reviewing like backpacks and different things on your channel? Was that kind of the idea?
Yeah, and it was super casual.
Yeah.
Just in the sense of like, here's the gear that I already own. Right. I'll start talking about it a little bit. But then a lot of the YouTube space at that time was filming your trip videos and like vlogging, I guess you could say.
Right.
I don't know, the vlogging was yet the way that it is now.
Right.
But I was holding the camera out in front of me and vlogging and talking to it and sharing my trip experiences.
Yeah.
And
you would actually go out on trips then and kind of capture it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the idea wasn't at the time to necessarily like, I'm going to go test gear and talk about it on this trip. It was like, oh, I'm going to go on this trip in the Uintas.
Anyway.
And let's record it and let's share it on YouTube.
Yeah.
Not with the intention of like, this is how I'm going to make money or this. It was just like a fun hobby, fun thing to do that also accompanied what I was trying to do with the blog.
Right.
And so I was trying to like just put as much effort into that creative outlet as possible.
Yeah.
And then I realized at one point that like, I could really make something potentially lucrative out of this.
Yeah.
And it wasn't always from a monetary standpoint. It was like, oh, I could maybe get some free gear, or I could help provide feedback to a company and share my experiences with it and like field experience. And
right. Like, I mean, anytime you can make money doing something you actually enjoy, right?
Yeah, totally.
That's always like a fortuitous thing, right? It's like it's a hobby or something. And then it's like, oh, I could actually make a living doing this.
Yeah. And if you reverse a little bit, just kind of rewind, I was studying outdoor recreation management at Utah Valley University. And that was one way for me to like really immerse myself into the outdoor space.
Yeah.
But I was working for a local climbing gym, Momentum, up in Sandy. And I was like, I don't want everything that I'm doing to be around my school and climbing.
Right.
So then like the hiking was something that I've just always been passionate about. And so I like made that the core niche of what I was trying to do with my YouTube and stuff.
So then did like a ton of brands just start sending you free stuff, and how did that work?
I took advantage of.
Do you have like a garage full of backpacks now?
I mean, if you saw my garage, it's kind of ridiculous, the amount of gear that I have. But because I'm working in the industry, I have several friends that work for, like a good example, I had a close friend that worked for Goal Zero. So I was able to get some product from them that just kind of like springboarded the opportunity for me to start reaching out. And I had the thought, and I even said this to my wife, is like, what if I just started sending emails to brands and was like, hey, I have this YouTube channel. Mind you, I had maybe 300 subscribers at the time.
Yeah.
Like super tiny. But I would just send a proposal to a company that I was interested in checking out.
Yeah.
Or their product, and be like, hey, I'm doing this. I'll make a video about this after I go out and do some testing on it and stuff. And
right.
Will you send it to me? I got a lot of no's, which is fine. Like that's to be expected.
Yeah.
But then I started getting companies that were excited about it. And so
was it smaller brands, bigger brands? Like how did that work, at least in the beginning?
In the beginning, if I was doing that grassroots, like reaching out, sending a proposal, oftentimes it was smaller brands. The brands that I had friends that worked for in the industry, or I'd go to outdoor retailer and kind of pitch ideas and stuff there. I don't know. It was just kind of like grassroots trying to be as much of a marketer in that way as I could.
Yeah.
And it's paid off in some pretty substantial ways.
Yeah. So you've been doing this for how long? So you started when?
It's been 10 years.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's been this like really big progression of this is a hobby to, now I'm getting some cool pieces of gear that I can test and share and have my experience with. Now making a little bit of money.
Yeah.
And now it's my full-time job.
Awesome.
So
yeah.
Quite the progression.
And how many people follow you or subscribe on YouTube now?
I've just passed like 60,000.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you also, you mentioned that you studied recreation management. Is that right?
Outdoor recreation management. Yeah. The technical degree is called Exercise Science Outdoor Recreation Management.
Okay. And so you did that. And now, as I understand, you teach a class on backpacking at Utah Valley University. Is that right?
Yes. So adjunct professor. I shouldn't even say professor. I'm an adjunct instructor for the outdoor rec program, teaching intro to backpacking for the college students.
So that's one of the reasons why I thought it would be fun to have you on our show. Is we've had a lot of people talk about their hiking experiences, but this class is like a crash course for students.
Yes, very much so.
On backpacking, right?
Yeah.
Which is a kind of a different animal. So can you, I guess, first of all, make the distinction between, when you're talking to your students, like how do you explain the difference between just like what you would take hiking and what you would take backpacking, and how the experiences differ?
Usually what I break it down to is a difference of when you're hiking, you're still carrying most of the same gear, and maybe you're planning a pretty similar way, but the distinction becomes, okay, now I'm spending the night, and what do I need to have with me to be comfortable, warm, safe, and protected from whatever elements, weather, climate, and such that you would be dealing with. So that's the idea, is like, okay, I'm carrying a large pack on my back, and I've got to take everything with me to be able to enjoy myself and have a good experience. And that's what I always try to focus on, is like, giving people the experience that you want to have, depending on what the location is.
Right.
And so it's broken down. I'll write on the whiteboard, backpacking, and then I'll write trip planning and gear.
Yeah.
And we'll go through all of the process of how you plan a trip and the experience that you want. So take, for example, you want to spend time down in southern Utah in the Moab area,
right,
or like Capitol Reef. That's my favorite national park in Utah. So let's do that.
Underrated.
It's amazing. So I want to go backpacking in Capitol Reef.
Yeah.
Then you can't choose gear before you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Right. So it's the idea of trip planning, figuring everything out, going through that process. What experience do I want to have? What's the season? What's the time of year? What's the weather going to be like? What's the group? If I'm going solo, with a friend, multiple people,
yep,
all of those considerations. And then I'm planning all the gear to facilitate that experience.
Right.
So
gear comes second. Or at least in the planning stages.
Yes,
right?
In that approach. Because it's like, if I'm going out on a trip and it's only going to be 50 degrees overnight, that's pretty warm.
Yeah.
And I take a 0 degree sleeping bag because that's all I have. You're carrying more bulk, more weight, and you're going to sleep way too hot for those conditions. So like sometimes not everybody's going to have access to all the gear to be like every single type of trip you go on is going to be this whole new set of gear, but you don't want to have the wrong gear so that your experience isn't facilitated in a way that gives you what you want out of it.
Yeah.
And I think the same thing applies to hiking as well.
Yeah.
Like if you're going to carry stuff for a day hike, are you going for half a mile or are you going for a full day and you're summiting a peak, like 12,000 feet?
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, even when we talk to people about hiking, like a 2 to 3 hour hike versus Timpanogos, right? There's a big difference, right? In terms of how you're preparing for it physically and what you're bringing and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, that makes sense. What do you find, like in your class, for example, like do you find that people are intimidated by backpacking?
It depends on the student, from the sense that I get everybody from you've never backpacked before, and this just sounds interesting, to people that are quite experienced.
Right.
Like I had some folks that had recently gone and summited Kilimanjaro. That's like, that's a bigger mountain than I've ever done. And I have a lot of experience, but they bring a unique experience to the table. And in the class setting, it's nice because there's an easy way for people to just play off of everybody's personalities and experiences and make something great out of it. But I also do my very best to make sure that it's as approachable as possible. So part of that is like giving them a trail and a location that isn't going to be too difficult. Because I mean, you think about it, like people always say with hiking with kids or something, like you're not going to take your like 2-year-old and let them hike all the way to the top of Timpanogos. Like it's just too much for them, right? Same idea with a student in backpacking.
So give them like an entry point, right? To have the experience, kind of know what it is about, what it requires, right? And then you can kind of build off of that.
Yeah, but then also like I make sure that I take them to as beautiful and like awesome of a place as possible. So that even though maybe we're not hiking a really difficult trail, it allows for an opportunity to just like immerse in that location.
So you actually get to take your students out.
Yes. Yeah, that's essentially their final.
Like the best class ever.
I know, right? It's amazing.
What's your final? You get to go backpacking in some beautiful location.
Pretty much. Like, and you pass the class if you go on the trip and you participate and you're awesome.
Yeah.
Like,
See, and I thought my students loved my classes. I taught film, right? So it was always kind of like, what? I get to teach these amazing movies, but this is like, this is a different level.
And that's such a common comment that when people find out that I teach backpacking, they're like, you can take backpacking at a university?
Right.
And it's like, yeah, it's actually the prerequisite for an entire degree. And they're like, what? Like, you can.
So what's that? Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think it's illuminating, right? Like, I think, I mean, I would definitely didn't experience that when I was going through school. So, what's the experience like for them? You know, when you take them out?
It's the full spectrum, and it depends on where that person is coming from. Some of the students that I have, it's really, really difficult. It's a hard experience. They don't like walking in loose sand, or they're not used to being at elevation. Sometimes we go into the Uintas and you're at over 10,000 feet in a lot of those areas, and they've never been at altitude like that.
Right.
So it's a mix of like, just maybe it's harder than they expected it to be.
Yeah.
But it's also super rewarding.
Yeah.
So there's this thing called the 3 types of fun. Are you familiar with this?
No.
Okay. So there's type 1, type 2, and type 3 fun. Type 1 is like, you are in the moment. This is amazing. I kind of compare it to like being on a roller coaster.
Yeah.
If you enjoyed, like, this is awesome. I'm having so much fun in the moment.
Yeah.
Like or like seeing your favorite band in concert.
Just like visceral. Just like yes.
This is incredible. I am so stoked right now. Yeah. Type 2 fun is, life is not good right now. Like, I'm in pain. I hurt. This pack is heavy. It's hot. I'm super sweaty. Maybe I'm a little dehydrated. This climb up the peak is way harder than I thought it was going to be. I am not enjoying myself right now.
Right.
But in retrospect, you are like done in camp or at the end of the trip, and you're like, good. Man, that was awesome. And it's like ingrained in your mind as core memory. This was awesome. What a cool experience. I want to do that again.
Yeah. Type
3 fun is where things go bad. You don't want to experience type 3 fun.
Yeah.
Basically.
So what is that? What's type 3? Just you don't.
Yeah, maybe
you have a bad experience. So how is it fun?
It's the idea of going from. Are you familiar with the concept of flow state?
Yeah.
Where you basically are in the wrong position of flow state, where your confidence is too high, and now your risk became the point that now somebody is injured. You injured yourself. You went too far, and you can't come back from it.
Right.
Or the opposite of, you weren't confident enough and you didn't get yourself into that flow state area.
Yeah.
And now you went the other direction of, this is a problem.
Right. So you get a mixture of those, like those last two.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
because I assume it's not the first one, right? Because like backpacking and hiking almost always requires a serious amount of effort.
Yeah. And I think it does depend on your experience level and the ability for you to, like, how much are you willing to push yourself? How hard is it really? Because I'll be honest, like when I'm out guiding my students, physically, the trips that I take them on they're not hard for me.
Yeah.
They're hard from a mental standpoint of working with students, making sure that they're taken care of mentally and physically.
Yeah, because you have to keep in mind everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not necessarily difficult in that manner, unless I choose a new route. Like even just a couple weekends ago, was in Capitol Reef with students, and it was the weekend that wind was just blowing like crazy. It got cold, and we were climbing up about 600 feet.
Yeah.
And I was in the moment, I was like, this is awful.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to be right here, right now, ever again.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So when you're out there with them though, and I wonder even how this has changed, if it has at all since you started, or if it's kind of a similar experience with the students, like meaning like pre-pandemic students, post-pandemic students, like whether the sensibility has changed at all. And just, again, for a generation that has grown up on screens, been inside a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe haven't had these types of experiences, what's that like? And has it changed at all?
I wouldn't say that there's like anything that stands out to me substantially of like a difference between the two.
Yeah.
But what I do notice is very often this is one of the few times that these people have been disconnected in airplane mode more than just a few hours.
Yeah.
Like they're out for a weekend trip.
They have withdrawals?
I would say so. Whether they say it out like verbally to me or not.
Yeah.
I mean, I have had students periodically that are like, "Are you sure we're not going to have service down there?" Yes, we will not have service out on.
I mean, to not have when you're used to having it, like all the time for years, right? And then all of a sudden, it's not there. There's got to be a kind of that alone, right? It must be like a jarring experience. Could be pretty liberating though, too. Mm-hmm. Have you had students tell you that like, oh, it was just so nice to be away from my phone for a while? Or is it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And it will happen in a few different ways, whether it's mentally, I was just able to reset and like clear my mind from all the stresses of things because I'm not constantly looking at my phone, or I made a new friend or friends from being out in the group and like working together and doing that stuff together that wouldn't have happened otherwise.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Devin. We'll continue the discussion in our next episode, including Devin's tips for those just getting into backpacking and what homework looks like in a college backpacking course. Thanks again to Devin for joining us. You can find him on YouTube at Backcountry Exposure and Instagram at the same handle. Escape the Noise is produced by Timpanogos Hiking Co. I'm your host, Joe Vogel. A big thank you to Kai Bradford for his assistance with scheduling and production, to the Wildfires for our intro music, and to Silicon Slopes and Weston Tanner for hosting us and helping us make it all happen. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you again next episode.